Hello there, this is Trisha. Welcome back to my craft room. I have a really pretty card project for you today using the Flowing Flowers stamp set. Pull that up. This really pretty stamp set with this distinctive style stamping. And I'm gonna enhance that with a little bit of watercolor and make this beautiful card. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip down to my desk and let's get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the card. The first thing I'm going to work on is this watercolor panel with the florals on it. And again, that uses the Flowing Flowers stamp set. And that's in the January to June mini catalog on page 36. This is that, as I mentioned, the distinctive style stamp where it has shading and different intensities throughout the stamp. So we're going to start with that and then take that to the next level with a little bit of watercolor. So let's set this aside. And I'm starting with a piece of watercolor paper. This is just a scrap that I have from my craft room, so I'm not even sure what kind of paper this is. But it's plenty big for the size of the card that I want. So I'm just going to cover this whole paper and then we'll trim it down in the area that we like the best. I'm going to bring in my Stampin Pierce Mat so that I've got a nice soft surface, and I'm just going to put a little bit of the a cut piece of my grid paper on there so that I can go off the edge of my paper. I've gone ahead and pre-mounted all of my stamps onto acrylic blocks, and I'm starting with this largest flower first. So I'm going to get my Pale Papaya Ink. And we're gonna stamp this. And we want to create an all over pattern. So I'm gonna stamp in the center first. And then when I say center, I don't mean dead center. I just mean that I'm not off the edges of the page yet. And then I'll work out from there. And I'm just going to continue to get this all in the frame, sorry. But I'm just going to continue to ink my stamp and work my way around. And I do want to leave some spaces open so I can fill in with the leaves. And I'm rotating the stamp around quite a bit to make it look random. And anytime you're doing an all over pattern, you want to go off the edge of the paper so it looks like that pattern just continues out and that you cut this from a piece of beautiful DSP or something. I think that's probably good. I'm going to be done with that. So my next step is to add a little bit of water. I've got some water in my water brush, and I'm going to do it again, but I've squished my ink pad just a little so that some of that ink transfers onto the lid. If you have the re-inker, you can also just drop a little bit of the re-inker in there. And I may or may not even need that. For starters, I'm just going to start with clean water, and I'm just kind of making sure, giving it a squeeze to make sure it's flowing a little bit. And then I'm going to run some clean water right on top of my stamped image. And this is a subtle difference, but what it's doing is it's sort of moving the stamped color, the ink around just a little bit so it is looks a little bit more colored in, if that makes any sense. And it blurs out some of the detail, which I'm okay with, because what I'm looking for here is a little bit more of a loose, watery color type look. So you can probably see this is not skilled watercolor I'm doing. I am literally scribbling some water onto here, and I am not a fine artist. I don't know what I'm doing. This is super easy, but I'm sure you can see the difference between this one and this one, where you really have some distinct lines in there. That's beautiful, but for this project, I'm just going for a softer, more blended look. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of put water all over the entire project. If I feel that I want to add a little more color back in, I can always pick a little up from that lid and just drop some in to get some darker colors here in the center. You can tap it in if you'd like. And this is optional. You don't have to do that. I'm just putting a little bit more of that color in the center. I think I'll do one more flower over here to the side with just plain water now. If you feel that your flowers have dried so much that you can't spread the ink anymore, then again, just pick up a tiny bit of watered down ink from your lid and you can get a real similar effect by just filling it in. So I've got these two done. To take it up a notch, I am going to introduce some Calypso Coral. This is the old style pad, but you can do the same things with this one. So now I've got the Calypso Coral here, and I'm just going to pull a little ink off of that lid and drop it into the center while this is still damp, so that it's not harsh lines and it's just going to spread real nicely. I'm giving my water painter a little squeeze to make sure that that's all nice and blended out. I might re-squeeze this to just get a little bit more ink in my lid. So I'm going to close it back up, give it another squeeze. And now I've got just a little bit more of that ink in the lid. Get it nice and wet, and then I can add just a little depth into the middle of those flowers. And I'm only doing this on the wet ones so far. So see how that one is a lot more stripier? If I squeeze a lot more water on there, I can kind of blur that out so it's not so harsh. And hopefully you can see how that looks. Okay, I've gone through and added water and a little bit of that Calypso Coral ink to all of my different flowers. And now I'm ready for the next step. I'm not sure if you can see on camera, but my flowers are still damp. They're not running, there's no puddles or anything, but they're not completely dry. So I'm going to stamp right on top of that while it's a little damp so that the stamping blends out just a bit. This stamp right here has a flower and leaves and some little dots, and I actually cut mine apart. It's supposed to be like this, and I just very carefully went through with my snips and just carefully cut that apart. That is not for everybody. I know some people don't want to do that, so if you don't like to do that, you can selectively ink this by covering this with some Post-it tape or Post-it notes, or you can use daubers or something to ink this in different colors if you would like. But I just chose to cut mine apart. And what I'm going to do is use just the floral part, and I'm going to use that Calypso Coral ink. And I can see on here which is like the center or the base of my flower, and then the petals kind of go up. So I'm going to take the base and sort of nestle that into the base of the existing flowers that I have here. And then there's really no particular way to line this up other than kind of making sure it points the same direction. And I'm going to stamp right on top of my first image. And I'm letting my stamp run off the edge of the paper where appropriate. And it's okay. I want that stamp to blur out a little bit and not look perfect, because this is supposed to look like, you know, a pretty watercolored loose look. So that is how our florals look to get started. And now we're going to fill in the background pieces. So let me switch over to my Granny Apple Green ink. And we're going to now use the leaf, and I don't even know what this is. It's not really berries, but like some sort of little dots. little accents. So I am going to use the Granny Apple Green for all of that. And because this is cut like along the edge of where the flower would be, I sort of use that as a guide and just wrap it around. It's not perfect, but just wrap it around the edge of a flower. I don't care that it's overlapping a little bit. And I'm just gonna drop in some leaves throughout my paper, kind of heading in all different directions. Do I need any more? Yeah, I might put like the suggestion of a leaf popping in from the side over here maybe, just to make it look like the pattern continues off the paper. And now I'm gonna do the same thing with my water brush. I don't think I'm gonna need any extra ink because this actually moves pretty well. So I'm gonna just take my water brush, and you don't even need to be inside the lines here. I'm just kind of blurring that color out, and it really adds a pop. This Granny Apple Green is so vibrant and bright, especially when you activate it with the water. I just think it looks so pretty. You can see here I went right over the petal of the flower, and I'm just not worried about that. Like I said, this is meant to be a real artistic looking piece, at least in my intentions, so don't really have to be perfect. There. So I now have just added a little water to all of those. And the final floral stamp in here is this little trio of flowers, which I also have on a block, and I am going to use the Petal Pink for that. This is real subtle, and it's just gonna fill in our background so it doesn't look all blank. And you can just kind of drop those guys, rotate it around so it's all pointing in different directions. And again, it might be overlapping at times, doesn't matter. And that gives us our beautiful background paper. Okay, this is the one that we just completed. And this is one that I did yesterday using the exact same technique. You can see they come out, you know, pretty similar. There's a little variation, of course, because it's a loose technique, but this one's all nice and dry, and I'm gonna let this one dry for a little bit. So I'm gonna use this one to cut out my portion for my card. Okay, this piece measures about 4 3/4 on the short side, and then I want it to be about 3 3/4 this way. And I'm going to use this Scalloped die. This is from the Colors and Contour, is that what it's called? Scalloped Contours dies. The Colors and Contours is a stamp set, but the Scalloped Contours dies has this beautiful scalloped edge. So I am going to line this up. I use my grid paper to kind of get it straight. And you have to be careful on the watercolor, especially if it's wet on watercolor paper. You need to be careful to use low tack tape. This is a nice dry piece, and I'll be super careful, but I'm gonna go ahead and run this through my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. I do need to cut this because I'd like it to run through this way. So I'm gonna run this through my machine, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm going to very carefully peel this so I don't pull up any of my beautiful image. Perfect. And now I have this pretty layering piece to go on the front of my card. And the piece that I cut is pretty close. I could probably get away with getting another scalloped edge. It might be a little bit narrower, but I could probably get away with making a second card out of this one. And if I don't use it for the same design, I could just put this on a card with a different design. So that's the beautiful thing about making a nice big piece, is you've got some leftovers. Okay, I've cut a piece of the Petal Pink Subtles DSP. This comes in a 6x6 pack with all the colors from the Subtles collection. and I think I cut it just a tiny bit off. So this is 5 1/4 by 4, and I meant to do it 5 1/4 by 4 1/8 so that it would come out a little bit more. So if you're trying to repeat this card, cut it at 5 1/4 by 4 1/8. What I'm going to end up doing is just trimming a tiny bit of my card base off so that this border is not so thick, but that's okay. It'll still work. And then I'll end up with this piece overlapped on the top, just like that. So on one of the little leftover scraps of the DSP, I am going to stamp our sentiment. This is the thank you that comes right from the same set, which I think is so pretty. I'm going to use the Calypso Coral for that. And I'm going to leave some space to the left of it and center it up and down on my paper here. Just like that. And I'm going back to my Scalloped Contours die, and this one that is second to the smallest, I am going to use this and line it up so that the thank you is all the way over to the far right edge. And I don't care if this piece is hanging off the end of the paper because that's going to get trimmed flat anyway. So I'm just going to adhere that and take that over to my machine to cut it out. So that gives me a piece that looks like this. Because of the slits in the dies, you've got these little edges that are disconnected, but that's okay. When I go to put this up on dimensionals, I will just make sure that I overlap that slit, and that way it'll hold it all together. So I'm not worried about that. So here are the pieces that we have of our card so far. I'm going to go ahead and glue this one down flat onto the card. Get that out of my way because I'm done with stamping. So I'm just going to go ahead and put seal on this one. And I'm putting it on the card all the way up against the creased edge, centered from top to bottom. And this is where you can see where I ended up with too big of a white border here. So if you cut your paper properly, you won't have that, but I'm just going to give this a little trim so that I don't have so much there. Okay, that looks better to me. Nothing, you can't make any mistakes that you can't fix. Everything is fixable. So this is my little layering piece that we created. So pretty. And I'm going to pop this up on dimensionals. Okay, I've got quite a few dimensionals on there so that it doesn't collapse on me. Get all my release paper off. And then this is going to line up right along the edge. Like that. So I'm eyeballing this, but I've got roughly the same border at the top and the bottom. And everything's stacked up over to the left side. So pretty. And now this piece that we stamped here is going to get put again stacked over to the left edge, but I want to add that bow first. So let me show you how I did that. This is the Petal Pink cotton ribbon. This came in the combo pack with Misty Moonlight ribbon, part of the New Horizons suite in the mini catalog. And what I've done is just cut this in half. So at one of my team meetings, my teammate Jackie showed us how to do this, and it really adds just kind of a fluffier, more loose organic look to your ribbon because it kind of starts fraying. And I think you can do this with, you can try it with any type of ribbon and see if it works. And all I'm doing is cutting right up the ribbon lengthwise. Getting started is kind of the hardest part. Once you've got it split a little bit, then you can grab the two ends and slide your scissors in there, and then it gets a lot easier. I am not worried about being particular, like right down the middle. That doesn't matter to me. I just want these pieces to look a little frayed and a little skinnier. And I'm just going to keep sliding my scissors right up the middle to the best that I can of this ribbon. Let's see how much I've got. Yeah, maybe a little bit more. Okay, that's probably enough. Now I'm going to go ahead and just give that a snip. And hopefully you can see, but these are like a little raggedy looking. Definitely fraying and coming apart, but I think it adds to the texture and makes like a real pretty look to the ribbon. And I'm going to do the same thing. Hold on, let me get a piece of white here. This is a piece of white ribbon from my stash. I honestly don't know where this came from. I just happened to have a little scrap of it laying around, but there's a white crinkle ribbon in the back of the annual catalog that's, I believe, carrying over. And I also think there's like a frayed white ribbon, so you could use either one of those. And I'll link them both in the description box below. But I'm just doing the same thing and cutting this ribbon right down the center. Again, to give an uneven, real rustic type of look. There. So you can see it's not perfect at all. It's kind of jaggedy. And this one doesn't fray quite as much as the cotton ribbon does, but that's okay. It'll all look pretty together. So I'm taking all three pieces, both halves of the Petal Pink ribbon, and then one piece of the white ribbon, and I'm lining them all up together so the ends are matched. And holding them together, I'm going to make a bow. And the toughest part of this is when you go to pull this through, making sure that you grab the right pieces. So carefully grabbing the correct pieces to form your bow. And then once you've got it in a knot, then you can play with all the tails. Hold on to the knot and you can adjust your tails a little bit to make your bow as large or as small as you like, to change the size of the loops and make it look however you'd like. Like that got too small, so I'm going to pull my pieces back out again a little bit, if I can. And if you just hang on to the knot, it should stay in a nice bow for you. Just wanted that loosened up a little. Okay, so I'm going to take a peek and see how that looks size-wise. And I do want it hanging off the edge of my sentiment there, so I think that's a pretty good size. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside. Got 3 loops on either side and then my tails. I'm going to just set that aside for a second, get all my shreds out of the way. And I'm going to put this up on dimensionals as well, but I think I can trim just a little bit off this left side. Yeah, I don't need quite that much. Just a tiny bit, maybe a 1/8 of an inch or so can come off that left side. Okay, I cut just a little bit off the left edge there, and I'm going to go ahead and pop this up on dimensionals. when I put the dimensionals on, I'm going to make sure that these slits are lined up and overlap the dimensional just a little bit so that it keeps that in place. Hopefully you can see what I'm talking about, but this little piece that's disconnected, when I lay them down, I make sure they're right up next to each other, and then just use the corner of the dimensional to grab both of them. Hopefully you can see that. And that way it doesn't come apart anymore. I'll do the same thing in a couple spots, and that'll hold that together pretty well. Okay, and I'm putting this, you know, on my other card I went up here, but when I do that I cover up the majority of the green. So I think I might go down here on this card. It's all up to you. But I think I'm going to go down there with it because I didn't want all of that pretty granny apple green color to be covered up. So I'm going to do that and then put my bow down there for this one. Okay, so to adhere my bow, I am taking a little glue dot and I'm kind of rolling it into a little ball, finding out where I want the center of my bow to be, and then tucking the glue dot right under there. And then I will press the knot of my bow right into it. And you can fluff up your loops a little bit, and then go ahead and trim your tails. So you'll end up with 3, if you do it the same way I did, you'd end up with 3 tails on either side, if you're counting. There we go. So that is my finished card. I love both of these, and I'm really glad that I moved that down. I think it looks pretty both ways, but I wanted to see some of that pretty green. So I hope you enjoyed that project. As always, I will link all of the products that I use down in this description box below. So if you're interested in the stamp set or any of the products, I'll make it real easy for you to jump over to the shop and find them. And of course, if you don't have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, I would love to be your demonstrator, and I'm happy to help with anything that you need. Just let me know in the comments, and I'm happy to answer questions or guide you in anything that you're looking for. Thanks so much for watching today. If you like this project, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and visit again so that you can see some of the other cards that I'll be designing, and I'd love to see you back real soon. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. Before you sign off, I wanted to just share a quick look at 2 other projects that I made using the scraps from my watercolor panels from today's project. So in this shot, you can see the bottom right card is the one we made during this video, and then there's 2 other cards that are birthday cards that I just took the panels and incorporated them into other designs. So I added some of the beautiful gold ephemera pieces and a birthday label on some Petal Pink cardstock for the top right card, and then I also used that scallop border and a little bit of Calypso Coral cardstock for the bottom left card. So don't throw away those scrap panels or extra pieces. You can always incorporate them into other designs. Thanks again for watching, and hope to see you real soon.